Hello and welcome back to the Fenway Rundown. Chris Cotillo here on location in Minneapolis for what feels like day 30. Sean McAdam is home after a hellacious travel day
Oh,
and a night in Chicago, but no one wants to hear about that. No one cares. Truly, no one cares. So,
that's
um,
your sympathy is overwhelming.
I cared, but the Red Sox fans are angrier than you were when your flight was delayed and then you couldn't find a hotel. We'll get into that in a different podcast. The trade deadline is done. The Red Sox made two moves, Steven Matz and Dustin May. That's it. Sean McAdam, your thoughts.
Underwhelming, to say the least. Uh, you know, Moderate upgrades. A back end starter who has already thrown more innings than he ever has in his major league career, who's injury prone, who's had two Tommy Johns, who missed all of last year. A guy's had difficulty staying on the field, pretty effective when he does, but not exactly durable, far from it. And Steven Matz, left-handed, which is nice, except if there's one team in Major League Baseball that
History.
did need a lefty in the bullpen, it might be the Red Sox. You've got a lefty closer in Aroldis Chapman. You've got a very effective lefty setup guy in Justin Wilson. You've got a good middle relief lefty in Brennan Bernardino. And you've got a good young lefty in Chris Murphy. So that part of it seems strange. I mean, it's not like Steven Matz isn't better than a couple of back end guys they have, but we're talking incremental improvements here and falling far short, I think, of what everyone had hoped for and anticipated. And I'll tell you, Chris, as I had this in my column that'll be up in a little bit. When I heard them being seriously in on Suarez, that's Eugenio Suarez, not Robert, on Wednesday night before he ultimately landed with Seattle, I thought, wow, they're going for it. Because if they were willing to pay the price for the biggest bat on the market and also know that they had to add pitching beyond that, I thought they're going to be bold here. Like they're examining all kinds of options. They're not half-assing this. They're looking to see what they can do to get really good pieces and really improve. And then it totally fell apart and they did everything by half measure.
Yeah. I mean, I think, generally over the last few years, the Red Sox have gotten that whole interest kings moniker, right? And people have been, oh, they're in on everybody but can't close the deal. And I think they did a lot in the offseason to disprove that. The Garrett Crochet trade was a big deal. They gave up, they got uncomfortable. And then I think the cherry on top, I think you wrote that night with Alex Bregman, the Red Sox are back. They outbid in their own way the field. They landed a player they wanted. They got super uncomfortable. They spent money, everything we've been, hearing fans complain about for a few years. Um, and then right now it's back to basically what we've seen in the past. Underwhelming, underwhelming, underwhelming. And just a giant tease, I think, for the fan base, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and I found it odd that Craig Breslow sort of several times, if there was a recurring theme in his Zoom call with reporters a few hours ago after the deadline passed, it was, hey, look, we were willing to do anything and everything, but our prospects didn't excite the teams we were talking to. And I found that strange. I mean, even with the graduation of Marcelo Meyer and Roman Anthony, I think most people think the Red Sox still have a top 10 farm system. They've lost some, obviously, some elite players in Anthony and Meyer who've graduated. Christian Campbell came up, went back down. Who knows what's going to happen there? But when you take two top guys off the caliber of Anthony and Meyer, obviously the evaluation of your system is going to dip some. But there's still a lot there, and there's left-handed power pitching, which is always attractive between early and
Tolley and Clark.
uh, right, Peyton Tolley and Brandon Clark. I mean, those three alone should have generated a lot of interest. You've got a right-handed power bat. That's also a skill very much in demand these days, probably right behind starting pitching. And none of that could get you what you were looking for. I found that curious as an explanation and curious as a tactic for Breslow to lean on.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously different tiers and different layers to this where, you know, I think the two biggest guys that moved, obviously, Joan Duran and Mason Miller in the relief market. Those are the two most impact guys. Miller comes with 4 more years of control. They got a top three, top five prospect in the game, who we've talked about a little bit on here, with Red Sox trade proposals the last few weeks. With Duran, a more palatable price. Dombrowski gives up McAdam, who a lot of people know, and another piece, and you get Tim for two plus years. Other than that, I think that what Craig Breslow was trying to say is that, the ask price on all these controllable starters, all the guys we were aiming for, just got to a ridiculous point. If there's evidence of that, and this is devil's advocate, it's that none of them moved. We'll get to Joe Ryan in a second. That's the big name of the day, as it has
Right.
been.
And I'm not
But
even
I'm saying Mitch Keller didn't move. Alcantara, Cabrera, Mackenzie Gore, whoever. No one reached the prices those teams were asking for. That's because they were sky high. Um, and so I think Breslow was trying to say, and it didn't do a fantastic job of it. Look, we offered more than we thought we were going to. We kept pushing, but just the prices were ridiculous. Now, the second guess, which I think you're about to get to, is Merrill Kelly did move, and Charlie
exactly.
Morton did move,
I'm
and
not
Suarez, and
criticizing
yeah.
them for not landing a controllable starter because 29 other teams looked at those asking prices and said, nope, no
And
thanks.
we didn't think they were going to heading into this week.
Right. So I'm not holding them accountable there, but of the guys they got, there were better options.
Yeah,
Merrill Kelly was a much better rental than Dustin May. Would he have cost more? Of course he would have. But wouldn't that have been a more significant upgrade to the rotation than Dustin May is
I
going to
would
be?
have rather done Morton than May. So
I would too. I mean,
that's
if you're going to take your chances on 2 months, do it on a guy that, even though he's 40 or in his 40s, has been pretty durable, which is more than Dustin May can say, at 28.
right. And Gallon doesn't move. A guy that we thought they were going to be in on. Hauser goes to the Rays. Some of these other rental starters. That's where the second guess is for me. Eugenio Suarez, a guy that they were surprisingly in on. I don't think either of us projected or predicted that. They wanted him to think about playing first base. He goes to Seattle, a team you're directly competing against, and so. But at the end of the day, the Craig Breslow quotes are ringing hollow with the fan base. And he basically said, no one wants to hear about how hard we tried. That's true. And no one does. At the end of the day, they didn't get the job done. They didn't, get. This is truly hard to believe, but they did less than they did a year ago. You
I
know?
don't know that I would say that. I mean, Lucas Sims and Luis Garcia were almost anonymous players.
Well, Garcia was, probably around what Matz is, and Paxton and May kind of in the same breath. Maybe May is a tick higher because Paxton was effectively DFA'd. These are two guys that lost their rotation spots. They added a bat in Jansen. He was horrible, but he was a bat, right, at the time. I know it's two guys versus five. It's not that far off, and they're in a better position they are now than they were then.
Yeah, this is a better team, more
Yeah, right,
deserving of help than they were a year ago, is I think what you're trying to
right.
say. And I agree. There's real frustration out there on the part of the fan base, which I get because they were kind of, you know, led down the primrose path here with all this talk in the winter about we're going to, the time is now. Fans have waited long enough, and they acted that way in the winter in
Hmm.
going out and trading for Crochet, then extending him. Of
And they
signing,
acted that way in June when they traded their best player.
right. Um, well, I mean, we can debate that.
I mean, it's an urgent, ballsy move, right? No matter
It
how
was,
you
but
paint
it's
it.
not an adding move.
No,
That was more subtract. They saw it, I think, although they would never say this, they saw it as addition by subtraction.
right.
That not only were they unloading a lot of payroll that they thought was not going to hold up well long term, but they were also getting rid of a guy who was distant and not being a good teammate in their mind.
Right.
So that wasn't a we're going for it here. This is we're getting rid of it. But we'll be better in the long run. And they may well that may well be the case. But this is the time to get better. This is the time to go out. The headline of my column is at a time when they needed bold strokes, they did half measures. And I suspect there's going to be there already are a lot of angry reaction to their timidity.
Yeah, and look, we just had a 25-minute Zoom call with Craig Breslow. The quotes are out there. I tweeted a bunch of them. They got a ton of reaction on X, Twitter, hellhole, whatever you want to call the app today. If fans were in the office during this deadline, they would see the guys we didn't expect to be willing to talk about going into these conversations we made available. Let's see. I understand the frustration, disappointment. There's not a lot of sympathy for how hard we tried to get deals across the line. We were uncomfortably aggressive. Other teams needed to say, "Hey, that's enough, and you've crossed the line of what we're asking for." At the end of the day, those explanations are, I think relatively honest from his perspective. He's trying to speak to the fan. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Those explanations do not matter. You didn't get the job done. We'll get into Joe Ryan and the semantics of all that in a second. It doesn't matter how close you got. It doesn't matter how far apart you were. It doesn't matter who you made offers for, who you made available, what you were willing to do. You got Steven Matz and Dustin May when everyone around you got better. And it's a failure. I think it's a failure no matter how you put it. I remember doing this exact same edition of Fenway Rundown a year ago in a booth at Fenway because they were home and they were playing that day. And we talked about, for this team, they did, a pretty good job at this deadline by getting half measures were what that team deserved. They didn't subtract, which was a large thing. They filled some gaps, filled some holes. This was an appropriate deadline. This was not an appropriate deadline this time around.
I
And
agree.
no matter how they got there, no matter what the excuses are going to be, no matter really what happened behind the scenes, no matter what was offered again, doesn't matter. It's a fail. And so they got to play their way out of it over the next 2 months.
And the troubling thing is, what's the message that Alex Cora has been sending the last few weeks, particularly when he
Years.
references the second half performance of this team?
Yeah.
It's been, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. Well, look at what other teams did. The Yankees went out and got two plus bullpen arms in Doval and Bednar.
And
And
Bird.
Big Bird's not a bad third guy.
Mm-hmm.
They got Caballero, a really athletic and speedy infielder who can move
Yep.
around, steal bases. Seattle got two big infield
The
cornerbacks,
Yankees also got,
Perez and Naylor.
Yankees got
Uh,
McMahon and Rosario and all these other guys too. But yeah.
I mean, because that happened a bit ago, I'm not even
Right.
counting that, but you're right. Texas got Kelly and two pretty good relievers. Uh, everywhere you look, there are teams neck and neck with the Red Sox. The Rangers and Mariners are, I think, a game or a game and a half behind the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
Yankees are a game and a half in front. All of those teams got much better than the Red Sox got better. And that's not good.
Yeah, and even the Rays bought and sold obviously and tried to thread the needle. They didn't give up Yandy Diaz, who everybody here wanted. You look at Detroit bolstering their team with Morton and some others. The Blue Jays with Bieber. Some of the moves they made. Houston, the Correa move is one of the big headliners of the day. I don't know how good he is. We'll find out, I guess, in the next couple of days. A lot of NL contenders. The flip side of it is, the teams below the Red Sox did kind of, sell, right? I mean, Kansas City, I guess they re-signed Lugo, so they didn't. Cleveland got rid of Bieber. There was some offloading, but
Minnesota took a wrecking ball to their team.
right, Minnesota took a wrecking ball to the
10
team, so they're
players.
right. Well, they're not 8 games back of the Red Sox or 7,
Right.
so they were not really
But
in the mix. But but
they were
that's
on the
it,
periphery of the wild card race
right.
a week ago.
Yeah, and
And it
so. But when you look at Seattle, got a lot better, and you look at the Yankees probably got a lot better, especially in the bullpen. Obviously, they're going to live and die with Judge and how he is. We will go to Minnesota now, which is not hard for me because that's where I am. We were obviously at Target Field the last 3 days, talking to a lot of Twins people, talking to people who are around, and I think, kind of set the broad scene. Nobody here anticipated that they were going to take that wrecking ball to the team in the way they did. I think, talking to people who covered the team, talking to people with the team, they expected definitely like Willie Castro and Paddock and some of these rentals to probably be traded. People did not expect Duran to get traded like he did yesterday.
Rhea.
People did not expect Correa to get traded. And so once the fire sale started, the talk about Joe Ryan really heated up. And there was a lot. I'm more online than you, Sean, but in the last hour, there was a lot of Joe Ryan smoke. Aided by John Morosi tweeted out the Red Sox were going to try to make a push for him. And MLB on Fox and Yahoo Sports. I think MLB on Fox, my theory is they misread Morosi's tweet and tweeted Joe Ryan has been traded to the Twins. Yahoo Sports saw
Red
that and
Sox.
then
Red Sox.
to the Red Sox. Yeah, been a long week. And then Yahoo, whoever on their social, saw the Fox thing and said, well, where did this happen? Oh, we get us. And they did the same thing, and they both quickly deleted them within 5 seconds.
Right.
And there was talk that they were pushing, they're pushing, they're pushing. When these tweets are surfacing, I texted somebody in Minnesota and said, Red Sox. And at the time, they said they're not offering as much as we want. This was 40 minutes before the deadline. And then when the deadline passed, you and I both heard from different people compared to what we wanted and the high bar that we had. They were not close. The words I got were not even close. I think there are a few people in Red Sox land, including some in the front office, that thought they were pretty close on Joe Ryan. They thought we are out of our comfort zone. Let's make this happen. And it still, in the eyes of the Twins, doesn't seem like it was a tough decision. This is an education. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, just echoing what you did, I had a text exchange with someone in the Twins organization who said, yes, there were conversations, but no, the Red Sox never really got very close. And that theme kept emanating from the Twins that, yeah, we talked right up to the buzzer, but we were never anywhere close to having it cross the line.
And so, these perceptions of everything flying so quickly toward the deadline can be different in different front offices. Maybe the Red Sox added a player at the last minute who they thought this is going to get this thing done. And the Twins looked at it and said, still not enough, still not even close. And there was a miscommunication. There's 3,000 conversations going on. But what we can tell you is that the Twins never thought they were on the verge of trading Joe Ryan. He was not moved. And, we can be called mouthpiece for, I love the mouthpiece for the Red Sox comments. Is it better for the Red Sox if we say it was close or not close? It really doesn't matter. It didn't get done.
Well, I mean, to me, it's not a matter of being critical or uncritical. We're relaying what the other side was saying about the Red Sox offer and shooting down the narrative that, almost right there at the 11th hour, they almost pulled one out of the fire. No, that's not what we're hearing at all.
And to that, the Twins clearly have done a lot of background on the Red Sox system because they know the Red Sox love Joe Ryan. The Red Sox clearly do love Joe Ryan. And in the offseason, I would be shocked if this is not revisited. We have the blueprint, right, with the Red Sox wanted Crochet, talked a little bit about him with the White Sox last deadline. Anthony and Meyer were who they wanted. The few months later, the price drops a little bit because there's less control involved. More teams get involved. They have more time to slow it down once the offseason, gets underway. And you can do it in that case for Crochet, for, Teal, Mydroth, Gonzalez, and Montgomery, the deal that got done. The Red Sox are going to hope, I guess, that the same thing happens. This isn't that Ryan got traded to the Dodgers and you're never going to get him. It's just you're not going to have him for these last 2 months. That is meaningful. But, the Twins, I think he was the one guy they said, we got to slow this down, make sure we get this right. The fire sale is happening, but he's the one guy. The bar is going to be extremely clear and they can go back to it in December. But again, what we're saying is that go ahead.
They'd gone through a long day where they traded almost half the major league active roster. And if you are holding out your most valuable commodity, and that's who Joe Ryan is really, left, that's not one you're going to hurry on. You're going to
Hmm.
take your time, do your homework, not be under the gun. We got to make a call here in 27 minutes, yes or no. That's a big enough one that you save, knowing that there's always going to be interest in a guy under 30. He's about to turn 30, but a guy who is still in the prime of his career, signed to reasonable money and under control for 2 more full seasons.
Yeah, and the control is
I want
exactly
to
the
make sure you
same.
hit on that one.
Right. Yeah, the control is the exact same as Crochet was. Two and a
Right?
half years to two. Is he a little bit probably less of a pitcher as Crochet? Yes, but also the flip side is he has a track record of the consistent year over year now for a few that
And has
Crochet
been
didn't have.
healthier than Crochet.
Right. So this is the name we're going to talk about in the offseason. The Red Sox do like him. We can definitely tell you that. But the people in the Red Sox organization, if there were any, who had hope and were, kind of spreading that narrative out there, the Twins didn't share that hope that they were that close, and that's what we can tell you at this hour. Again, we don't know, what they were offering. People, I think, I don't know the names, and it's tough to ever get to that point. And you rarely get the names of certain offers. I know we have here and there in the last couple of weeks, but on this, like, there is a world in which the Twins legitimately said to the Red Sox, we're not doing it today unless you give us Roman Anthony, Like that's possible, right? I mean, it's not people are like, oh, well, maybe if they included Tolley, they would have got we don't know. My guess is that it was sky high. And that is backed up by the fact that again, those guys didn't move. I would be again more critical of the controllable uh, pursuit falling short if they if we saw Alcantara and Keller and all these guys move. They did not. And so the second guess here is on the Merrill Kellys of the world and the Suarez and whatever path you want to go down. But I think that is a name we're going to keep talking about.
Yeah, it's obvious that even with the likelihood of Giolito returning, with Bayo under control for a number of years, and Crochet, of course, leading that rotation, this team, particularly if and when it gets to October, is going to need an upgrade in that number 2 spot. And it won't be Joe Ryan this October. We don't know that the Red Sox are seeing October at this point. They didn't move that forward much today. They may still get there on their own if they can play as they have for the last couple of weeks. But at some point, they're, having gotten the number 1, now you got to figure out the number 2.
Yep.
Let's think of it as, and I'm not putting all of these guys as direct comps, but after 2003, the Red Sox had Pedro Martinez, and it wasn't enough. So they went out and got Kurt Schilling. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean Ryan is ever going to be Kurt Schilling, and it doesn't even mean Crochet is Pedro. But you need that 1 and 2, and they don't have the number 2 right now.
Yep. And you know what? Bayo has shown a lot. Maybe he emerges as that down the line. But the further you can push everybody back in the depth chart, like we talked about Tuesday when we did the pod, the better. One other thing I want to circle back on, just because I think it's a really interesting piece of this puzzle. You look at, where's the heat, where's the onus when you're looking at an organization. And I wrote as of the trade deadline, I mean, as of the All-Star break, which was just 2.5 weeks ago, that, the pressure is on Alex Cora to not have history repeat itself again with the second half slide. Um, while also saying, well, there were deadlines where the Red Sox didn't do enough and other teams passed them. And, my assumption was at that time that, well, when they go out and they get, a really good rental starter and a couple bullpen arms and a first baseman, 'cause I thought that's what they were going to do. We talked about what was your prediction? Merrill Kelly and O'Hearn, right? I think was yours. And, I think I said, maybe I thought maybe somebody a rental starter bullpen arms. I thought two the whole time. Again, I got one kind of. Um, the onus was going to be on Alex Cora now that roster was loaded up to deliver. The onus is again off him now, right? Like he can use for the 8th year in a row or whatever it is. I'm being a little hyperbolic, like the 3rd year in a row or the 4th and 5 times. We didn't get better. What did you want from me? Other teams get better. Look what the Mariners did. Look what the Yankees did. And so, I know he get his contract. I know, job security is not an issue for him right now. But if there's another last 2 months slide, Cora is going to, I think, skate a little bit because the narrative is always going to be, and I think rightfully so, May and Matz and nothing else, right? And so, um, in that way, I think there's a big impact on the manager today.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the manager and we started talking about Craig Breslow, let's also go higher up the food chain and ask, and this was something I had meant to ask of Craig Breslow and didn't get a chance. What sort of, if any, financial restrictions was he operating under? Because you had reported that in their dealings with at least one major league team, they were trying to offload some salary of a player they were trying to acquire
Hmm.
as if they needed to stay away from that second CBT threshold where the tax rate goes up and the penalties increase. Was that a factor here? It's hard to believe it was. Uh,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, it's a something they were considering and talking about, and they were fine and pushing to have some teams take on a little bit of money. It's not the reason they didn't acquire Joe Ryan, who's making 3 million a year.
Correct. But it is, I think, curious that that was at least a factor. And that, look, every team would like to say, sure, we'll take a guy, a guy who's making a little bit of money, but you need to take some of it back. You obviously, the less money you're taking on, the better it is for your organization. If you're not doing that, you're not doing your due diligence. But it seemed like a prerequisite to at least try to unload some of the money they might have taken on a player in a trade they talked about. And that doesn't set well with fans either because all they hear is not wanting to spend, and that reinforces that narrative.
Yeah. And, a point that you've made right along here is fans look at it after the Devers trade and said, well, we're out of all that money. They're going to be able to spend it in July. That was never going to happen here. It obviously didn't come close. I mean, Matz is making like 12 a year. That's four more down the stretch. And then, May is making, I think, 700,000 for the rest of the year. So less than 5 million added to the payroll. Not nothing, not huge, unless you're doing that Correa deal, which obviously they had no reason to do. But there's just there was probably creative possibilities. Those are usually, I guess, better for the offseason too.
I wonder too, I mean, and this is stretching it, and I know some people have floated this. And Correa has already said that the only way he would have approved a trade, because I think he's got some no trade protection in his deal,
Yeah.
would be to go back to Houston. Obviously, it's the organization he came up in, still close with a lot of guys there. Happy to go back. If he had to leave Minnesota, which he liked, he was only going to go to Houston. But we know that he and Alex Cora are close. That they worked together for that year in 2017 when they won a championship. There's some ties there. And while you would ask, well, where would he fit in here? What if a condition of the Joe Ryan trade was you don't have to strip your minor league system for this, but you got to take most of Carlos Correa's money to make this work? Would you have done that?
Yeah, I mean, I just I think the Twins probably wanted to decouple those two things, and from a Red Sox perspective, I get what's the how do you do that? You move Story to second, have him play short, or move Correa to second. I know he's going to be playing third eventually for Houston, but I mean, it's just
The short term, let's remember that Marcelo Myers is not part of this equation right now,
right.
and could not and could be out for the rest of the year. You and I and a million other people think they have dodged this question right up until 6 o'clock to
Hmm.
make sure that
And after,
right, and make sure that it didn't make them look any more desperate than they were. If people knew that Myers not going to come back again, then that adds a little stink of desperation to any trade talks that you have. People think they can use that for leverage and take advantage of you. Just a thing to think about.
yeah,
If that had been proposed, could they have found a way to work Correa at least into this year and figure out how to use him for a couple of months? Then you've got a lot of money left and a number of years left. Maybe you can pawn him off on somebody else in the offseason. Who knows? But would taking on that money have convinced you if it meant getting Joe Ryan without giving up four top prospects?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the Twins wanted to take care of that situation if they could, kind of a special circumstance with
Yeah,
Houston,
I
and
get
then,
it.
restock their system. So I wouldn't say that was particularly likely. But anyway, Carlos Correa and his Houston Astros will be at Fenway Park tomorrow night. I will not. You will. Dustin May, who knows if he'll be there? Who knows who's going to start for the Red Sox? That's still TBA, TBD. But I appreciate everybody for reading and following along during this very, very busy period for everybody. I know fans are locked in. I know you're disappointed, but we appreciate you sticking with us on the Fenway Rundown. Remember, don't shoot the messenger. We weren't in the front office today.